Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the special Democracy Day live session hosted by the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. And happy Democracy Day in advance. Today's theme, Democracy and the Economy, Charting Nigeria's Path to Prosperity, invites us to reflect on the powerful relationship that exists between democracy, governance, and economic transformation. We all know it. We've heard it 1,000 times. Democracy is a government for the people, by the people. We have lofty ideas of what democracy means. But in today's conversation, we're going to take a step back to pause and reflect on what democracy actually means in actuality and how can we use it as a tool to unlock economic prosperity for Nigeria. Is democracy just around political freedoms? Is it just around electoral systems? Or can it be an actual tool for economic inclusion, inclusivity, innovation, and long-term and sustainable national development? This is a timely conversation, as you all know. Nigeria is facing challenges, but democracy, we believe, can be a tool to solve some of these challenges and chart the way forward. This conversation is convened by the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, and NESG has been instrumental over the last few years in ensuring that Nigeria has a vision for her economic prosperity. And today, we're going to go beyond theory on this, and we're going to go into the practicalities and know two more incredible and remarkable people to take us into this conversation. Today, we are joined by two remarkable thought leaders who will help us to unpack the last 25, almost 26 years of democratic rule in Nigeria and look at how this can take us to the economic future that we aspire to build. Today, we are joined by Professor Olu Ajakaiye and Dr. Joseph Ogebe. Now, Professor Ajakaiye is currently the chairman of the African Center for Shared Development Capacity Building in Ibadan. It is a research and training center for shared development policy, planning, implementation, and impact outcome assessment in Africa. Prof consults for several international organizations, including, and please stay with me with this one because it's a long list, the World Bank, UNECA, UNDP, ECOWAS, IDRC, ACBF, JICA, the EU, DFID under the UK, the British Council, BMGF, and numerous other Nigerian government ministries, departments, and agencies. In addition to this, he obtained his BSc in economics from the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, his PhD in economics from the Boston University in the United States. He was also a John Holt Scholar at the University of Ibadan, a NISA Scholar at Boston University, the IDRC Thesis Grantee, and Boston University and AERC Visiting Scholar at the University Laval in Canada. Now, I'm sure you are already excited about this conversation based off of the profile I've read on Prof. But then we're also joined by Dr. Joseph Ogebe. Dr. Joseph is an accomplished economist with over a decade of experience spanning the private sector and international organizations. He currently serves as the head of research and development at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, NESG, where he leads strategic research initiatives on economic policy and sustainable development. His work has shaped national dialogues on the economic reform and policy-driven growth in Nigeria. He holds a PhD in economics from the University of Ibadan and contributes regularly to academic discourse as an external reviewer for several scholarly journals. I'm sure you must be teeming and buzzing with excitement like I am because of the caliber of people that we have in this conversation. And so I know that as the conversation goes on, you might have some questions. We will take as many questions as we can towards the end of the conversation. So please, if you have questions, please leave them in the comments. I would also flag that Prof is having a little bit of network challenges, and so he might be in and out of the conversation, but we'll try and pull him in as much as we can. And so without further ado, let's dive straight into the conversation. And the first question is kind of around setting the scene. for democracy and what it actually means in the context of economic development. We all know that democracy is kind of seen as a political system built around, elections, participation, but in the context of a nation's economic future, democracy, we believe, kind of takes a deeper role. I believe it takes a deeper role. In a democratic system, there's rule of law, there's transparency of governance, there's protection of, human rights. We empower the citizens in a democracy. But I'll be curious to know more from the experts in the room. I saw that a study says that 20% higher. That's democratic nations have a 20% higher rate of achieving sustainable development as opposed to autocratic nations. And so, does democracy actually link with economic development? And what does democracy really mean in the context of Nigeria's economic development? Dr. Joseph, I'll go to you first. What do you think democracy actually means within the context of Nigeria's economic development?
Yeah, so thank you, Solapi, and good afternoon, viewers. So my straightforward answer will be that yes, democracy matters for economic development, but I just want to point out how, what my views are on democracy and what my views are on economic development. So, democracy is not just about, electing your leaders or, the election process, right? So I see democracy, going beyond that to involve public participation, also accountability, rule of law, and the protection of rights, right? And for economic development, right, I also see that to go beyond just the normal rise in real GDP growth, which most times you see economics, explain, but it should involve, poverty reduction, building inclusive prosperity, and ensuring human well-being, right? So if you link democracy and economic development. So democracy in the context of economic development is all about, public participation in public policy. The way citizens elect their leaders, right? We vote for our leaders. We can influence, their tenure. So that same way we should be able to influence economic policies and economic priorities, right? We should be able to, engage the governments to say either in budget process or public hearings on budget or on economic reforms or development plans. We should be able to push for, the citizens' agenda that will be much inclusive. Will carry along, the groups that are maybe that are less cared for, or the group that are highly marginalized, women, youths, and maybe all communities or regions that are marginalized. I also see the democracy I also see democracy in the context of development to be about, ensuring equity in the design and implementation of public policy. So growth must be inclusive. Democracy demands that no group should be left behind or no group should be excluded. And so for instance, if with the recent policy on subsidy removal, what's in a strong democratic setting, there should have been already well thought out plans to help protect the marginalized groups, right? Either maybe through cash transfers or any other ways to help cushion the effect of subsidy. I also see democracy in the context of economic development to be about transparency and accountability, which is very important. Public resources must be well managed, and when I mean well managed, it must be transparent and open. In some other countries, you can track the amount of taxes you pay. You can track what your tax is being used for. You can track, you can track how the government spend money on each sectors or each activities on education, health, social protection, housing, and the likes. So, in a more transparent society, we see democracy should be, should be tilted towards, to help boost transparency and accountability, especially with public finances. So democracy matters, yes. So like, but democracy matters for economic development, through its influence on institutions, making on institutions and trying to make better public choices, and this must be done by the citizens. So the citizens must push for better public choices. Just the way we push to elect our leaders, we should be able to push for better public choices, right? So I just want to end that to say that democracy is not a magic bullet. I know you said 26%, it's not a magic bullet, but the quality of governance and local context are crucial, for economic development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph. You've said such powerful things as we've started the conversation, the importance of, the citizens pushing for, what they deserve, the quality of the government, the importance of rule of law. But we have Prof in the studio with us, although please bear with us, he's going to have his camera switched off so that we can still have him on the call because of the bandwidth of the network. But I'm also curious to hear from such an academician that has been in the field for such a lengthy period of time. Dr. Joseph has set such a fantastic context. So Prof, could you also then tell us from your own perspective what you think that democracy means in the context of Nigeria's economic development? Prof, can you hear us? Okay, I think that Prof might have had to drop off because of the network. Or I think he might also be having some technical difficulties because I know that he's in the room with us, but perhaps can't hear us. But let's go to the next question and then we'll circle back to Prof. And since Dr. Joseph has already provided us such a rich background, I think that the next question kind of takes us to the next step, because we've talked about the importance of democracy, and Nigeria has been a democratic society for the past almost 26 years, since 1999. And that experience in Nigeria has been significant in our economic growth and development. Nigeria has had ups and downs over the last few years, especially in terms of economic strides. For instance, we know that in 2013, Nigeria became Africa's largest economy. And since then, of course, a lot of things have also happened, and we're seeing some challenging times now. And in 2022, the National Bureau of Statistics reported that over 60% of our population lives in multidimensional poverty. And for people that might not know what multidimensional poverty means, this means poverty that is beyond income, but also reflects in things like education and healthcare, and just in the standard of living and the general well-being for people. And so while we have had some really good highs, we've also had some really low lows in our economic development as a nation since 1999. And so my question to you, Prof, and I'm sure you'll be able to shed some light on this for us, is how have Nigeria's democratic systems, however perfect or imperfect, shaped our economic progress since 1999? We've had some very, very big strides. So how has the democratic system in Nigeria helped to shape some of these strides, and how is it shaping the situation that we currently are in as a nation? Dr. Joseph, over to you.
Okay, so thank you, Solape. So quite interesting question. So, after decades of military rule, the Nigeria returned to a civilian democracy in 1999. President Olusegun Obasanjo, was the president then, and since then, like you mentioned, the democratic space has actually expanded, and on how has the democratic systems impacted our economic progress in 1999. So I would say the impact has been mixed. I also think you alluded to that. The impact has been mixed, with some sort of positives and also some challenges or constraints or weaknesses, which I believe it's something we can actually work on. And just to also set the context to say that we've also seen that most countries with very strong democracy, are associated with progress in terms of their economic development or economic prosperity. So on the positive side, we see that since the start of democracy in 1999, there have been some, kind of macroeconomic stabilization in early 2000s, right? So compared to the military rule, right? So for instance, we did the debt relief. We did the debt relief. In 2005, during the early democracy stage, at our early democracy stage, we also did the banking sector reform. We also saw the pension reform, and the big one was on telecommunication. Which actually has actually grew tremendously in terms of the number of subscribers and also coverage. So some of these reforms, macro stabilization reforms, macro reforms, we saw was at the onset of democracy. These things were possible with democracy, compared to where we were coming from, the military rule, right? So for me, I would say that democracy has actually yielded some positive gains in terms of ensuring macroeconomic reforms.
Dr.
Also,
Joseph,
yeah, can you hear me?
I don't want to interrupt you, but I also feel like you could also just explain briefly what macroeconomic reforms are. Not everyone is an economic giant like you.
Okay, so reforms are actually good for development or progress, right? So when you recognize that there are some certain level of imbalances or instability in an economy, you need, just like the doctor will prescribe pills, right, for you to take in and to correct those imbalances or instability in your body. So this is the same thing in the economy, right? So there are like prescriptions or pills or plans or agenda that the government should follow or will follow to ensure a more prosperous economy, to ensure that the well-being of the citizens are better off. So those are the kind of reforms. So we saw the banking sector, for instance, for the banking sector, we saw that most of the banks were highly capitalized and they were made strong. They were made stronger compared to where they were coming from. We had numerous banks then, but they cut them down to about 25 or thereabouts. So then we also saw the debt relief from the Paris Club. So that also reduced our debt burden tremendously. The telecommunication reforms, we also saw that, right? So that also made most of us to be able to get our GSMs or our mobile phones, mobile network, now compared to before, compared to where we're coming from. So I can say clearly that the democratic system actually helped us to take some bold reforms, some good reforms at the onset in early 2000s, right? And also with also, so what we also see again is that the democratic system also supported building of institutions. So it was when we started the democratic system, that was when we saw some of these economic institutions coming into light, and to reduce economic and financial crimes. For instance, a good example would be the EFCC, Economic and Financial Crimes. It was established in 2003. And we also have the ICPC. So we saw institutions springing up, right? So these institutions are very necessary for economic progress and economic development. We also saw better management of our fiscal revenues, especially in terms of oil revenues. We saw the establishment of what we call the excess crude account. So this is like, the excesses from your oil revenues will be saved into the excess crude account. And at a point, it rose to a certain number of billions of dollars then. And so we also saw also improve accountability and robust civil society. We started seeing civil societies, coming into play to try to, check the government and also try to hold government accountable. Then something again that we also noticed at the onset of democracy was improve social investment. This is very, very important because this takes into cognizance include the concept of inclusion. We saw that the government established the Universal Basic Education, the UBE, and this made most of the citizens to be able to enroll into this program. We also saw the conditional cash transfer we also saw the Empower program, And something again we also saw in terms of social investment was the establishment of the NHIS, the insurance scheme, right? So with this democratic system, we've seen, institutions coming up, social investment. We've also seen some kind of economic reforms, but however, it's not all good and fine, and we still have some challenges, which I think, in my own view, that there are things we can work on. The democratic system, has, in Nigeria, we have this 4-year election cycle, and so we have this we have this 4-year election cycle, and sometimes this actually affects economic planning or economic policy. For instance, if a new party comes in, they would want to change what the existing one actually started. This is not just at the federal level, even at the subnational level. I think it's more of an issue at the subnational level. If a new governor comes in, he starts a new project, right? So we tend to see some kind of policy reversals or policy inconsistent policies, as a result of this democratic. But I think it's something that we can work on. If there's a law mandating that most of these things should be followed through, irrespective of the government that gets into power, right? That will help strengthen the link between democratic system and also economic progress or economic prosperity. Then we also see that some of these institutions, I just want to note that some of these institutions that we have, some of them may still be weak. We still need to strengthen them, right? We are not at at the best position yet, because if you just pick some of these key indicators, such as corruption, control of corruptions, rule of law, and the like, from the World Governance Indicator, you compare or you benchmark Nigeria with some other countries, even with Botswana, you see that we are far apart. Even you are far apart from certain countries that just key comparators, right? So these are things that we can work on, and to help strengthen the link between democratic system and economic progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph. That's been such a rich submission to the conversation. And I think something that you've echoed throughout the conversation is institutions. So something that democracy brought for us is the introduction of institutions and accountability systems, whether it was governance institutions or through the civil societies. The institutions matter. And that also has played a role into perhaps some of the dips and some of the progress that we've seen. I think before we go on to the next question, I think Prof might be able to hear us now. Prof, can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, that's fantastic.
The system is very unstable.
I can imagine. Thank you so much for bearing with us and the network in Nigeria. And while we have you, let me just quickly mesh the two questions into one. So what do you think about Nigeria's democratic systems? And, what are your views on how far we've come and the role that democracy might have to play in our economic future?
Well, thank you very much. I had snippets of what Dr. Ajakaiye was saying, and they are exactly, in the right direction in terms of cataloging what, has been happening, or what the political actors at the federal and at the subnational levels have been doing, listing those very impressive efforts on their part. But the fundamental issue is, the perception or the perspective of the political leadership at all levels about the role of the government in the economy, or the role of the state, as it were, in the economy. The first 16 years of our democracy was really a disaster in terms of the perspective of the leadership and their role in the economy. They have been, they adopted this watchman approach. All these interesting institutions they put in place, they didn't come from an activist state in the economy. It came from a pacifist, some kind of a security guard type posture. But countries that have made a lot of progress in a democratic setting, they have a state that accepts responsibility for managing development of the society. And one of the weaknesses of our system is Section 16 of our Constitution, which specifies the role of government. Unfortunately, it's not justiciable. If it were justiciable, many of these things that government did in the first 16 years of our democratic process.
Oh my. Seems like, we might have lost Prof. I think I'm just going to give it a few seconds because he was in the middle of saying something very interesting. Yeah, I think Prof might be back now because he was.
Are you hearing me now?
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Please
Hello?
go ahead, sir.
I'm back. So it's been coming up, so please bear with me. So I'll try to make it very snappy. Now the challenge therefore is because that section of the Constitution which defines the economic objectives of the state and exactly how the state should operate in the economy, it's completely at variance with what was done in the first 16 years. The neoclassical, or if you like, neoliberal perspective of government has no business in business is what pervaded the process, and that was why you saw all government assets, they were privatized in a very prodigal way. They were sold and consumed. I don't know how a society can progress when your capital is consumed and you think you can progress. You cannot progress. All the assets of government that those people, so-called privatized in a very prodigal way in the first 16 years of our democracy, has ended up leaving government with almost nothing. Now the following 10 years so far, seems to be redirecting gradually, but it's also sluggish. They are not really very. I mean, for example, the following 8 years of Buhari regime, we expected it to, because in line with the constitution of the party, which is in line with the aspiration of the constitution, which says the state has responsibility for managing the society and ensuring that they manage the economy in a way that gives maximum welfare and happiness to the citizens. That implies that the state should be more active, particularly in getting the economy to be in the right direction and ensuring that policies are taken to ensure that the people's welfare are protected. Unfortunately, that system, to change the system of a state is not an easy task. So I can understand that. But we didn't see a very active move. So in the last 2 years, there are indications that they want to do that. But unfortunately, the first 2 steps they took was completely at variance with the philosophy of making life, more abundant for the average citizen. You are raising revenue in a way that raises cost of living, in a way that raises cost of production, in a way that leads to systematic decimation of our industrial base. As recent reports show that over 700 business enterprises in the manufacturing sector actually had to close shop because of the inclement, environment, that the policies that were put in place, generated for them, and therefore they have to shut down. If you like, 24 years of our democratic process, you see that the key macroeconomic indicators of performance, you find a situation of jobless growth. In a sense, you have economic growth that is not accompanied by employment, in an environment where you have growth that is also accompanied with poverty. That is not the kind of growth that society wants. We hope that from with the current regime, they will take a cue from the constitutional provision. Particularly if they go back and look at Section 16 and always ask themselves, how consistent is what we are doing with this section of the grand norm of democracy, which is our constitutional provisions. Once that is the platform for against which they will checking on the veracity and appropriateness, as well as suitability of macro and structural policies then they will start redefining their own path. The current path, which is now, a gradual shift towards more activist state on the economy, should be speeded up so that we can actually get there. And it is in that context that the principle of consultation, participation, not the PPP framework, which is like a transactional thing, and we have seen how disastrous it has been in Nigeria, because the private sector guys who are partnering with government, they are not different from people in government. Corruption and all kinds of rent-seeking tendencies are there. So if government adopts a framework that actually is built on operationalizing Section 15 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, and also that takes a position that government has business in business and is therefore very deliberate and determined about that, and ensures that they work with people who will not perpetrate corrupt practices, rent seeking. Dealing with individuals in business is not the way. You deal with the organization, not individuals. Because if you deal with individuals, the tendency for them to be organizing and arguing for what will benefit their own business interests. But we don't want individual business interests being promoted. We want the interest of the group.
Yes, sir.
In the society, which includes both labor, the business leadership, the civil society organizations, as well as other stakeholders in the system, to be working in a consultative and collaborative way. Countries like Malaysia, Indonesia now, that have made progress. They adopted this philosophy of Malaysia incorporated, Indonesia incorporated, Japan incorporated, which was their leading country in that region. South Korea incorporated before they start running into this current crisis. Now, when you have that kind of an incorporated arrangement, then you find that all actors will be working, with the same, philosophy, with the same goal, and they'll be working for the same good of everybody in society in an inclusive way. So, if you do that, then the result will be different. So, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
No problem at all. I love the passion that you're bringing to the room, and you've said some really profound things, taking it all the way back to the Constitution and Section 16, which should be the basis of all of the government interactions with this subject. And this is definitely a profound point that we're going to take. And you said a lot of other things too, in terms of politics and the watchman approach and, the neoclassical framework that has been the bane of our existence as a nation, especially in terms of our, our structure and our approach to democracy and the economy. And you've already touched a little bit on my next question, which is why I was smiling so much. You've preempted the question even before I asked it. Because now we want to go into the building blocks and the foundational elements of democracy. I love that you mentioned the welfare of the people, and that should be the principal thing in terms of the government's approach to economic development and prosperity, as opposed to public-private partnerships. And so now we're going into the foundational elements of democracy and things that would directly help us to reach that economic transformation across the world. And you've mentioned Korea and Malaysia. And I believe that Dr. Joseph mentioned Botswana earlier. What are some of, and of course, this is in your perspective, what are some of the core principles of democracy that would truly support economic transformation? I know that we've talked about it a little bit: citizen participation, accountability, institutions, the government, holding the government accountable. But we want to dig deeper a little bit, and we'll just take this in about 3 to 4 minutes. I'll go to you first, Prof, while we still have you, before the network plays games. So, Prof, in perhaps just 3 to 4 minutes, just tell us some of the core principles of democracy that we should be looking to get us to that economic transformation, and then we'll go to Dr. Joseph. I might have jinxed it and spoken a bit too soon because it seems like Prof has dropped off the call. So we'll go to Dr. Joseph first and then hope that Prof will be able to join us a little later.
Yeah, so thank you, Solapi, and interesting question. I must confess. So to me, I feel that democracy offers institutional foundations that can actually support sustained economic transformation, and but this is only this will be made possible when certain principles or certain democratic elements are actually strong and functional. And some of these democracy, some of these elements are sort of building blocks of in a good democratic setting. Top of my head, one will be a good rule of law and property rights. This is because a predictable and fair legal system, that protects property rights and also investment. This will also encourage investment, both domestic and foreign, to come into the country, and this is necessary for economic transformation. So the rule of law is very fundamental. It's a very fundamental democratic principle that we need for economic transformation. And if you check, just like Prof mentioned, if you check South Korea, right? South Korea, they have a very strong legal system, very strong legal foundation, and this is also associated with their, the improved growth and poverty reduction and inclusive and sustainable growth. You see, so that's a good example. Another principle or foundational elements I want to mention is, accountability and transparent governance. This is very important. I touched on this earlier on. Because economic transformation requires large public investments, right? But these public investments must, they must be accounted for. So accountability will help us ensure that there is no wastage, right? And that is only when, those investments can actually drive, growth, create jobs, and, trickle down and, reduce poverty and, create more inclusion in the economy. And so when I discuss with friends and colleagues, one of the countries I usually give example, with very strong accountability and transparency framework is some of the Scandinavian countries. If you check Finland, right? Finland, they have a very strong, strong and accountable system. They are very transparent and they are very accountable. And you can monitor or track finances, public investments, even the debts, they take, right? You can track what they are being spent on. If they're spent on, servicing recurrent spending, or if they're spent on servicing, more projects or infrastructure that you can actually use to repay back your debt. The third principle, which we all know, that I will explain now, is called the freedom of expression or information. This is very important because if you take a step back and check where we're coming from, compare this to the military rule, right? During the military rule, this freedom of expression and information was quite limited. Currently we are not there yet. We have the freedom of information bill, but this is very important, for economic transformation, because economic transformation also depends on knowledge flow and innovation. It's only when you have knowledge flows or discussions across different sectors. These are important for economic growth and transformation. And a society without good freedom of speech and media freedom, press freedom, it will be difficult to actually engage the government in some of the economic policies or the economic plans that they plan to implement. And for countries, you can check most of these Western countries, they are quite open, and you see the published information on public finances, government spending, government revenue, any of most their economic plans. You see them updated always on their website. So this is also very important for good policy advocacy, data-driven evidence and analysis, right? Then the last point I want to also touch on is on the principle of checks and balance, right? Mm-hmm. Checks and balances. This is important, in the democratic setting. And just like we know that separation of power between the two arms is very important, but this will also, because it will help us to prevent abuse of power and ensure that economic policies actually serve the interest of the nations. For instance, if you have a policy being proposed, right, and the president, without going through the Senate and the House of Rep, right? Like your budget and other policies, they go through these checks and balances, and sometimes you see it can help to scrutinize or to better improve performance in a country with strong democracy, right? Like I said before, we may not be there yet, but it's something we can work on. And so this is what we see from other countries, like South Africa. When they present their budget, you need to listen to the budget debates and the budget public hearings on their budget, right? They critically touch each and every, they check to see how will these budget numbers trickle down, to the marginalized groups in the society, to those in the communities, right? So, just to summarize my points, I want to say that democracy doesn't automatically delivers economic transformation, and this is very important. Democracy in itself doesn't necessarily deliver economic transformation, but the foundational element provides an environment where economic transformation can be more inclusive, where economic transformation can be sustainable, and can also help create a more resilient economy. So the foundational elements or the foundational principles of democracy can actually help for economic progress or economic transformation in a very strong democratic setting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. That has been a wealth of information for us. You've mentioned, and this is just from what I heard, 5 key points: rule of law, accountability, transparency, legal foundations, freedom of expression, and freedom of the press, checks and balances. These are all very key things that will be the foundational elements of democracy that would support our economic transformation. But you left off by saying that democracy in itself cannot guarantee economic transformation. It's just how we use it. And Prof is on the call. I'm so excited about that because I'm curious to hear your own perspective on this. Do you agree with that statement, or you have contrary views? In 3 to 4 minutes, let's hear from you, sir.
Thank you very much. I hope the network continues to cooperate. But all the points made by Dr. Ajakaiye, they are quite correct. But there are little things. Those are not foundational. Those are just instruments that are normally there and can be messed up by the system if the philosophy of the state is wrong. The philosophical posture of Nigerian state vis-a-vis the democratic setting and the economy must not be taken for granted. What has happened is that we have been, since 1986, as a matter of fact, we have been derailed from our path of development, where we saw the state as an instrument for advancing development of society. And when we now became democratic, all those interesting points raised by Dr. Ajakaiye, they are just like compliments to that philosophical posture. My feeling, therefore, the foundational, element of, democracy and its support for economic transformation is in the belief that the state has responsibility for managing the economy in the direction that society wants. Society wants is a stable, self-reliant, growing, as well as transforming economy, where you find the structure of the economy changing in the right direction, and technological advancement is unimpeded. So what we have been having in the Nigerian setting is that we are putting these little blocks of rule of law. You are free to talk. You can shout as long as you like. You can, but the state has left the system in the hands of people who are just vandalizing the system. You privatize everything and nothing is coming out of the private. Look at our steel industry, for example. All the steel rolling mills that have been privatized, which one is producing now? We are now importing, steel for construction, whereas we are supposed to be producing this in our country from Aladian, Osogbo, and Jos. All those things, they have been privatized under this philosophy of government as no business in business. So the things that government should take responsibility for managing the Nigerian economy, and therefore ensure that the following things happen. First, any policy that will escalate cost of production should be seriously considered before you take it. Anything that will complicate the cost of living, you should think very seriously about it. Anything that is likely to generate unemployment, you should seriously think about it, so that we don't have this syndrome of jobless growth. Once those philosophical positions are taken, then all the good points raised by Dr. Gebe, they are just compliments to what we're talking about. So sorry. So that is the additional I like to add. In a sense, the foundational issues are beyond what Dr. Gebe was talking about. Those are not foundational. Those are just instruments. The foundational issue is, what is the role of government in the economy? Once we settle that one out, all these other little things will just come to complement, and then it will make the soup very sweet. But if the soup itself is not even there, so whether you have a pepper, you have salt, you have a condiments, will not make any difference. You must also have your pot, and you must be ready to cook the soup, and the kind of protein or vegetable you want to put there must be decided before you then start adding all these other little things. So my view, therefore, is the state should take a decision as to exactly what you want to do. This government, it appears, like I said earlier, it appears it is taking a different track from what we had during the first 16 years of democracy in Nigeria. But it is slow, and it's also a victim of hangover of the watchman state perspective. They should get out of that trap and then confront issue of corruption very frontally. For example, if they had sequenced the subsidy removal process, just apart from just announcing it on the podium, but go and sit about it and say, look, what is the level of corruption in the subsidy scheme? Let us clean it out. The rest, we can decide whether we can afford it or not. But nobody did that. Both the rubbles and the substance were pushed onto the prices, and we are now suffering under it. Meanwhile, the various people who are busy fleecing the system under subsidy regime, they've shifted to other areas, and they are fleecing the system. So if you don't find a way of having a kind of a public-private interface that will bring everybody onto the table, not as individuals but as organizations, and then all of us subscribe to a particular development agenda, and our roles are assigned to the private sector, to the society, to the labor union, to the traditional rulers. Everybody has a role to play. Once we know our roles, we then go and do our role and have regular review meetings. How far have we gone? What are your challenges? What is causing trouble for you? Who is causing that trouble for you? What can we do to resolve your problems? That was what was done in Malaysia. That was what was done in the beginning in South Korea. And that's what is going on now in Indonesia. That's what has happened in Singapore and Taiwan, the so-called Asian tigers. So let us get those foundational issues established, and that is in line with our constitutional provision. It's so interesting that if Section 16 were disabled, everybody would have been in court, and government will not be able to do all these things, and our system will not have been as vandalized as it is now. So maybe the first thing, we should get the National Assembly to amend that constitution and make that section of the constitution justiciable, so that people can go to court and say what you are doing is not in line with what with the grand norm of our democracy, which is the role of the state in our economy. Once that is sorted out, then other things will then follow. So I agree, with Dr. Ogebe, but these are little things. The core is exactly how to make Section 16 of the Constitution justiciable, and how to get our political leadership to subscribe to the idea of the state has responsibility for managing the economy and society, and therefore do things that will make sure that we make life more abundant for everybody, growth that is job creation intensive, and also a growth that is not accompanied by a poverty escalation. I mean, at the same time the country was growing, everybody was saying Nigeria was the second largest capital, poverty capital of the world. What kind of paradox is that? That's not the kind of growth I want in the country. And that's why we have all these challenges that is confronting us. So let me stop here.
Thank you, Prof. I was even just about to say that you are even preempting some of the questions that we have in terms of preferring solutions. But I think that with the submission from your good self and with that of Professor Joseph, I think we have a solid foundation that we've been able to establish in terms of the core principles for democracy, because Dr. Joseph has told us the things like the rule of law and the institutions and accountability and transparency, which are all very important. But you have then now brought a more foundational perspective into it. And when you were speaking, my mind went back to the good book that says that if the foundation is destroyed, the righteous will perish. And perhaps that is what we are seeing in today's Nigeria. And now that we've established that foundationally, we need to address some things, and then institutionally, we need to address some things. This is the core of the problem. I think that this has expanded our understanding of not just the theoretical aspects of democracy, which we covered at the beginning, but the more practicalities of democracy as it relates to Nigeria, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to get into the nitty-gritty of our lived experiences as Nigerians, and then go ahead to chart a path forward. And the next question is sort of related to this in terms of charting a path forward and our lived experiences as Nigerians. And this is one that I'm particularly passionate about, which is that of inclusion. We say that democracy is for the people, by the people. And we see that in the Nigeria of today, certain groups are excluded. There's a certain role that citizens and all of the citizens have to play to ensure that democracy isn't just, some theoretical abstract thing, but it's one that foundationally and institutionally is upholding the rights of the people, but it's also ensuring that we have a strong economic foundation. We all know that policy is not made in a vacuum. It's made through consultation, debate, evidence, research, and, a host of other things. And in Nigeria, we've seen various, things pop up here and there, like open government partnership and, more clamor for the inclusion of youth, the inclusion of women, the inclusion of persons with disabilities in all sectors of society. But are we really seeing progress in this? And how is this affecting our democracy and our economic progress? And so my question to you is, how can democratic practices like inclusion and participation be better integrated into Nigeria's economic policy processes? I know that it goes without saying that it's important for us to include all citizens, women, youth, persons with disabilities, the grassroots, top down. And so how can we better do this to ensure that everyone's voice is heard? Because when we fix the foundation and we fix the institutions, the next thing is ensuring that everyone is carried along. So in your opinion, how can we be better poised to do this, especially in the policy process with regards to economic progress in Nigeria? Dr. Joseph, over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I thought this was for Prof. So Salapi, so good question also. You've been raising very good questions all this while. So the democratic practices such as inclusion and participation can actually influence economic policies and the design of economic policy. And so it can actually influence the design of an economic policy and, the debate that goes into the design, the draft stage, and also how some of these economic policies are also implemented. In an ideal democratic setting, right, it's very important for the citizens to be part of the design process of any economic policy, right? So the citizens should be able to push for what will benefit the greater good of the society. And for instance, I'm aware that during the needs policy, there were some kind of consultations at sub-state level and at national level and with some civil societies. before that policy was designed. But some of these other policies we see now, we can't really, tell how broad these conversations were, or how broad the citizens were actually carried along, were actually included, or what their participation is before some of these policies were designed. And like Prof alluded to, the subsidy removal pronouncement in mid-2023, it's something that, it should have been well designed, and it should have been well, structured, and also the citizens should have been, carried along, so that some of these consequences that we noticed, especially on households and on businesses, would have been averted, or would have been, cushioned appropriately, right? So it's very important for citizens to participate in broader economic policy design, and also how these policies will be implemented, at both federal level, subnational, and even at the grassroots level. So that's very important, and something again I just want to stress is that it's only when you include the marginalized, or you carry along the public, right, in designing your policy, that's when the policy will get high degree of acceptability. So the public tend to accept what they are part of the process, right? For instance, I'm aware that there were several meetings with labor union and civil societies, just to explain some of these the policy, the recent reforms, right? So if the government listens to the labor union, listens to civil society, listens to the private sector and other organized private sectors, that will help shape economic policy better. And it will also help most of the marginalized groups, either the women, the youths, or maybe those that are close to poverty, or households that are close to poverty. So these are just my take on inclusion and participation. I think they are very important, to transform the economy, and to help better design and implement economic policies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph. I think you've kind of echoed what I'm thinking, but you've come at it from a very technical and economic perspective. And so I'm very interested to hear from Prof, who is on the call with us. In your own opinion, and from your own academic background and consulting background, I know that you must also agree with me that inclusion is super important in terms of democracy, but also securing our economic future. And so how can democratic practices like this be integrated into Nigeria's economic policy process? Oh, yikes. We might have lost Prof again. Well, while Prof is trying to join, let me just say that we're almost at the 1 hour mark, and we're here till 2. So I hope everyone is enjoying the conversation. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, please, I encourage you to leave it in the comment box. We're going to try and answer any questions before we leave here today. And Prof is back, so let me hand over back to you, sir.
Yes, I'm back. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry I'm back. Again, all the points made by Dr. Ogube, they are acceptable to me. The only thing I wanted to add is that from the presentation and discussion, not only by him, but even by the operators of the system, they make it appear as if it's like a privilege, to just allow you to come and talk to me. I'm the boss. Come and talk to me. If I don't want to hear you, I shut you out. What we should do is we have to institutionalize the consultative, participatory process, so that people will see that it's not only right, it's also their responsibility. The other thing is, when you say you must listen to labor, it's like people coming to ask for favor. For example, when you are talking to labor union about minimum wage, they should also pledge to you that if you grant this level of minimum wage, we shall do A, B, C, D for our members to become more productive, so that the output will become so large as to drown the cost escalation implications of raising the minimum wage, for example. But when you just make it appear as if give my own share and don't ask me what I do with it, it's like everybody begging the king for a gift, and what he gives you, you go home and start thanking God. When you finish, you come back again, start begging again.
Prof, are you still with us? Okay. I think Prof might be experiencing another bout of technical difficulties. However, I do see his point, and let me not be presumptuous by saying I know what he wanted to say, but I did hear that being able to make it clear that consultation is not a favor.
Let me
it's a
just finish
right.
the point.
Yeah, consultation is a right, and it's important that we
Hello?
institutionalize these things. Oh, Prof, you're back. We lost you for a second. That's
I'm back. I'm sorry. You know, yeah. Once it goes off, I quickly come back, and
No problem.
somehow
You can just
it
wrap up
fluctuates.
your point
So
in about 30
I think you have
seconds
got
to a
the
minute.
drift. You have got the point I was making. Therefore, maybe I can just say a hand over to you. Clearly, it is just that we should make the consultative process. We should make the participatory process. We should make the inclusion process a right and not a privilege. And number two, people who are given the right to come and participate, they must not come there to be asking for what John F. Kennedy said. Don't ask what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Absolutely. That should be the philosophy of this government now. That look, when you are coming to participate, you are coming to participate to also take responsibility to take certain steps to make your own contributions and be held accountable for. See, we think accountability is only at the level of government. It's also at the level of private sector. It's at the level of labor. It's at the level of civil society. When people are not accountable and you are just asking government to be accountable, it's like you are just demonizing government. People are the people that are supposed to be accountable to themselves. So everybody that comes to the table to participate, everybody that comes to the table for inclusion, everybody that comes to the table for consultation must come there ready to say, if you do this, we will also do this, so that we can all move towards the same destination that we are looking at. So for me, what we should do is institutionalize the consultative process. Interestingly, in the National Assembly, there's this when you do second reading, you then go to public hearing. Those public hearings, a lot of times they are very meaningless, because it's jamboree. Everybody is there. It's a large hall. Everybody is just talking, and then when you finish, they go. Nobody finds out what did we say and what did we also pledge to do. It is the executive at the ministerial level, at the presidential level, and also at the state level, at the governorship level, at various ministerial level. They should have people that will be consulting on various sectors of the economy and society. And everybody that comes there should be ready to say, we will also be doing A, B, C, D, we shall contribute this, not just give us, and then start blaming government for accountability. You too must be accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. I think you've said so many interesting things, and you're kind of leading up to my next question. It's like we're singing from the same hymn sheet at this point. But just to kind of summarize, and you've said it brilliantly, it's on both sides. The government must communicate with the people, must consult with the people. It's a co-creation process, but the people must also communicate in a constructive and productive manner. Accountability is two-pronged. It's on the both sides. The government is accountable to us, but we are also accountable. And I love the quote you use. I use it a lot. Not what does the state have for me, but what can I do for the state? Because at the end of the day, we are all working towards that future together. And that brings me to the next point, really. And that is the role of the actors involved in the process. We've talked a lot about the government. We've talked a lot about the institutions that the government creates. But what is the role of the average man? What is the role of the citizen? What is the role of civil society? They are key stakeholders outside of the governance system and the governance process that are all very important for shaping Nigeria's economic future. there's ongoing engagement between the state and civil society, and we see that a lot. And I love that you mentioned the public hearings in the National Assembly, for instance, where civil society comes, people come, labor unions come, stakeholders come, and they converse, they talk about the solutions and some of the challenges. But what does that actually mean, and what role do these people actually have to play? Because as it stands in democracy and in democratic institutions, the citizens are supposed to be active contributors to the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of our policies, especially from top to the bottom, from the federal level down to the grassroots level. Yet, I believe that in some way, this collaboration between the government and the other actors is kind of underutilized. And so, what do you think should be the role that the citizens, the civil society, the private sector, think tanks, even like the NESG, can do to defining Nigeria's economic direction? And I'd like for you to make this as practical as possible. There are people on the call that are listening right now, and I'm sure a lot of people blame the government, but they might not realize that they also have a role to play in securing our economic future. And I think that I will ask you first, Prof, in just, and because we're already at the 1 hour mark, I'm going to be a bit
Okay.
stricter on time. So in just 3 minutes or so, what do you think these key actors can be doing to ensuring that Nigeria's economic direction is that of sustainable growth and development?
Thank you very much. I hope the system continues to cooperate. It seems to be cooperating so far. Now, like I said, once we institutionalize the consultative process, whereby we have the state, the private sector, the labor unions, and the civil society, the Nigerian civil society, not these development partners who are just coming to confuse us, we should then regularize the meetings. At the time when we are starting, for example, the budget process, the various actors in the economy who will be impacted by the policies should be consulted. In the case of the business community, you invite the leadership of the man, leadership of Nasima, leadership of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce, because all the the prominent private organizations, not individuals, organizations who will be carrying the views of the society of their own constituency to the meeting. The labor union leadership at the same time should also be part of the process. The leadership of the recognized civil society organizations, not these activists just blaming government for everything and not themselves. The brown envelope arrangement. The journalists should be there, and at that meeting, government should lay out its own ideas, and then let us hear what all the other stakeholders feel about it. And after agreement, assignment of responsibilities between government and all the stakeholders should be given, so that everybody will know what you are supposed to do in your own corner, contributing to the goal. So by government laying out what it wants to do, is like to get everybody to agree to a goal. Once we all agree to a goal, then the roles of each actors in that goal should be defined. And that's where I see NESG as a very strong instrument in that direction, because as giving its root in the real sector of the economy, essentially the manufacturing sector, which is like the missing middle of Nigerian economy, and of course the operators in the service sector and operators in the agricultural sector, primary sector, mining, and all that. This should all be NESG should always provide a platform for them to actually engage with government leadership in the various sectors, like the mining sector, like the oil sector, like the manufacturing sector. All of those people should be meeting under the platform of NESG to hammer out agreement as to where we are going, and also what each person should bring to the table, and then have a framework for regular review.
I think Prof might be cut off a little bit in terms of the network, but really great points that he's brought up in terms of regular consultation, clear roles and responsibilities, clear goals as well that have been set even prior to the consultation so that the consultations can be strategic. And of course, the role that NESG has to play in all of this. And I think that these are really great points. And I'm going to come to you next, Dr. Joseph, to kind of elaborate a little more and just share from your own perspective the role that citizens can play, and perhaps even give us some practical tips and points. But of course, we have some comments as well. Eniola has mentioned that that national prosperity has been sacrificed on the altar of politics, which is something profound. And I think that this comment from David, who said that there should be clear lines of feedback from the people to the government, also kind of ties in here. So with these comments and these things that Prof has said, what do you think is the next step for citizens, civil society, private sector, and the third sector in ensuring that we all play our part towards Nigeria's economic future?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. I think Prof is back. Or should I go ahead?
Welcome back, Prof.
Yeah, please. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, please, you can go ahead. Let me hear you too.
Okay, yeah. So I align my thoughts with what Prof just explained, right? So it's kind of important for and based on your question, right, for the citizens, civil societies, and private sectors organization to actually participate in shaping economic direction. Because if you come to think about it, right, an improved society or an improved economy, the benefits we cut across both the citizens, the private sector, and also civil society. Everybody will feel the impact, right? So my view, I think that for citizens, they should be able to play some kind of oversight rules or accountability role also. So I recall that for some years ago, about 3, 4, 5 years, the Ministry of Finance usually put up this budget calls. So they call people to listen to the budget before they present it to the House, right? So you can join online. They used to have it at the Federal Ministry of Finance building. Then you can join online, give comments, and I recall that then some citizens used to give comments to say that you have this kind of big disparity between your budget and actual numbers, but you're still increasing your budget for the next year by this big chunk again. That why this so sometimes those things could be useful. They could go back and say, let me readjust. I didn't meet this target, I didn't meet this revenue target, I'm over ambitious. So some in those ways, right, those are practical ways you can actually in terms of public consultation, you can actually help to shape the economic direction for the country. That's for the citizens, right? Then for civil society, I see big job there in terms of advocacy, policy analysis, and also monitoring, right? So civil society should be able to put up good data-driven analytics or analysis to help government redirect their thoughts towards their economic policies or their plans, right? For instance, there's a recent report by Budget that says that so amount of insertions were into the budget, right? And if you check the social media and everywhere, that's actually generated some kind of conversation. So the advocacy, policy analysis, that role will be better played by civil society, credible civil society organizations, and also in terms of monitoring, right? So there are some I know of Tracker, Tracker and some other there's this IMAC you use to track government projects or government plans or even procurement, right? So so these are ways to also help monitor or check, and all these will contribute towards shaping economic direction for the economy. That's for that's for the civil society organization. Then for private sector, I think the private sector also has a big role to play, just like what Prof said. The private sector can also help bring the government and the private sector together in a room and discuss how to finance, especially big projects or like infrastructure, right? So infrastructure, you all know the numbers that Nigeria needs, a certain amount of infrastructure to grow by this. So private sector can come in to, to finance infrastructure with the government, or to also help to see how to, help create better jobs and help also create, better prosperity, right? And for what the NESG is doing, the NESG it's a foremost think tank, in Africa, and it provides a platform for where private sectors or private sector leaders, engage with the government to shape economic policy. And as you know, we have the NEST, which we do every year. It's a big one. It brings together the government and it brings together private sector leaders and citizens and also concerned Nigerians to see how we can actually, shape economic policy better. And with all these, I think it will help. If they are well strengthened, if the government listens and takes some of these actions or recommendations from these actors, it will help shaping the economic direction of the country.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph, and Prof, for your excellent contributions to this. I think that you've said a lot of things, but all very valid. And there's a comment from someone called Olushola on YouTube that says that Nigeria is a complex nation and we need complex and complicated solutions for the path to prosperity. And I think that kind of ties in with all the things that we've said. Definitely, Nigeria is a complex nation, but also a great nation. And these things can be achieved with, equally interesting solutions for some of these challenges. And I think that some of the things that you've mentioned now will definitely be instrumental in ensuring that there is more accountability and transparency in our systems. We talked about the role of the citizens, the role of civil society, the role of the private sector, and the things that are already being done, and how it's important that these consultations and the things that civil society and citizens are saying aren't just met abstractly, but they're institutionalized in the consultation process of the government. And that kind of leads me to my next question, especially when we say complex solutions in this risingly and increasingly complex world. I'm hearing there's a lot of conversation around tech, innovation, AI, especially in today's world. And there's so many things happening, and there's so much that we have to catch up to as a world, especially because the world is literally, it's a global village. Everything is it's interconnected. And so in terms of innovation and job creation and entrepreneurship and tech and opening up Nigeria for possibilities that perhaps we couldn't even fathom, there's so much that we can do as a nation. But how is democracy helping us to innovate? How is democracy helping us to think? How is democracy helping us to come up with complex but simple solutions to complex problems so that we can see even more gains than we thought or think? And the IMF says that countries with higher levels of freedom tend to have stronger entrepreneurial ecosystems. And so is there a link between innovation and democracy? What do you think about this? How can we intentionally design democratic spaces, both physical and policy-based, to unlock innovation, fuel entrepreneurship, and address Nigeria's job creation challenges in today's society? I think, Dr. Joseph, I'd go to you first for this. And I just ask you to just 2 to 3 minutes for this question. And then before you come up, I would also say that if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please don't hesitate to pop it in the comment box and we'll try and address it before we leave. So over to you, Dr. Joseph.
Yes, so Solape, thank you. I will be very brief on this. Democratic spaces, allows us to freely express our ideas and take part in decision making. Also, put forth these ideas to in public spaces, and it also allows some of our rights to be protected, right? So even when you have a good idea, you can come up to say these things, and you'll be sure that your fundamental human rights, or maybe you have freedom of expression, those things will be guaranteed, right? So let's, in terms of how democratic spaces encourage innovations and entrepreneurship, and this will also lead to job creation, right? So what I see is that from the angle of freedom of expression and open dialogue, this actually has impact, or could impact innovation. Why? Because democratic societies usually encourage open dialogue. It encourages idea exchange, sharing of ideas, and also critical thinking, which is very necessary to drive innovations and entrepreneurship. For instance, I'll give an example of the tech hub in Yaba, right? So if you're in Lagos, you know the tech hub, you know the success story of the tech hub, right? So the freedom of expression, open dialogue, and critical thinking and others. So this will actually help to create innovation, and also promote or drive entrepreneurship. And also another foundation I want to lay out here is on rule of law and the rights and the rights of the people, because this is also very important for investors' confidence, and also for innovation and entrepreneurship, right? So countries, research have shown that countries with credible rule of law and also property rights, and they tend to attract more investors, and these investors go into sectors, and they can also that go into more innovative sectors, right? And this will also help to create jobs, right? And so what I see, or what I see is that countries with credible rule of law and property rights could help build more investors' confidence. It will also foster fair competition, and it will also if you have good rule of law, and cases of corruption could be reduced, right? And also there could be some element of stability in itself, right? So depends on your country's rule of law, and also your country's attitude towards property and legal rights. So some of these things can actually help create more innovation, and also drive entrepreneurship. So to me, I see that I would say that there is need for the country to strengthen its rule of law, and also strengthen its anti-corruption efforts. And also there is also need for the country to protect digital rights and freedom of expression. If you go to social media, and or you go to some other social medias, you see some kind of so people complaining about infringement about their digital rights, and also freedom of expression. And the country should also try to promote inclusive economic policies through continuous civic engagement. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph. I think that has been an interesting way to sum up a very complex economic submission. You've talked about the importance of, opening up spaces and the role that democracy can play in that. And you've done it so much justice that I don't think we'll belabor the point. I'd go over to Prof now, but I'll be asking you a different question. One of our listeners has shared that they're doctoral students, and one of the challenges that they've learned is the lack of funding and government support. And that seems to be a sentiment that quite a lot of people share, that there needs to be more support for businesses and more funding. And so we're going to the question I'm asking is around the risks of weak democratic institution, and how that affects investment and the business environment. The reality is that it appears that when democratic governments are weak and inconsistent, the business environment is affected. The World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index ranked Nigeria at 131 out of 190 countries in terms of ease of doing business in 2020. And we've already talked about how democracy opens the space for investment, but if the democratic structures are compromised, then that might also close up the space for investment. And so, perhaps from your own experience, how do you think we can strengthen these institutions? I know that we've talked about it a lot, but just as a way of kind of tailoring it specifically towards investments, how do you think we can strengthen our institutions to kind of bolster investment confidence and foster a more enabling environment for business? I do believe we might have lost Prof once again. But this is a very important question. So I think I'll throw that to you, Dr. Joseph. I know that from your wealth of experience, you'll be able to do this question justice until we have Prof back again. So how do you think we can strengthen democratic institutions to improve investor confidence? I know we've touched on it a little bit. So perhaps in a few words. Prof is back. Prof,
I'm back.
did you catch the question?
Yes, I got the question.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank you, sir.
Yes, so very quickly before the system goes again. All the points raised so far by Dr. Dube, they are in line with that, idea of strengthening the democratic institutions. But I think a weak democratic system is the one that is going to be unable to provide safety, security, in addition to all those good things that Dr. Odebe has said. So it's the mark of weakness of the democratic system that we see in insecurity. We also see that challenge in not taking for granted certain fundamentals. For example, the what we call universal intermediates.
Oh, wow. Just as it was getting to be very interesting talking about universal intermediates, seems like we might have lost Prof again. We're just about to round up. Perhaps, Dr. Joseph, you just want to jump in here to say a few things about this topic so that we don't leave it. Oh, there we go. I'm always so happy to see you when you pop back in. Welcome, sir.
Yes. Thank you. So, like I said, universal intermediates, in particular, power. Power, people must be able to take it for granted. You don't want to start scratching your head like all I'm struggling with here. Unstable system, unstable network, all those are very disruptive. It doesn't allow for people to think. It doesn't allow people to actually do the best, for themselves and for the society. So a weak democratic system is the one that will be unable to ensure that those universal intermediates are stable and steady. And like I said, once you have that along with safety and security, people should not have anxiety traveling at any time, walking around at any time, because people get inspired in various ways. It is freedom to walk around, the fresh air. But when you're afraid that somebody will kidnap you, somebody will grab you, somebody will shoot you, then your mind is no.
Well,
all right. So
okay.
So just bear with me. If it goes off, I come back almost immediately. So the addition I have to what has been said so far in terms of creating an enabling environment for investors, for innovation, for ideas, for progress, is to ensure that the democratic system assures availability and regularity and stability of certain fundamentals. First, security. 2, power. 3, good transport network. See, those are fundamental, features of societies where people will feel free. Freedom by law is one thing, but freedom by environment is even more primary. If people are free to travel, people are free to speak, people are free to talk, people are free to think, because certain fundamentals are taken for granted, then you are going to find us. So in my own view, government, the current government that we have, if they can help solve permanently the problem of power, if we can help solve permanently the problem of internet connectivity, if we can help us solve permanently the problem of insecurity of all types, in the farms, on the streets, on the road, everywhere, if we can solve those problems so that people can feel that they are in an enabled environment, both by way of basic infrastructure and also by way of soft infrastructure like safety and security, then we will have done it. So any society that is unable to guarantee those ones, it's not going to be able to create an environment for innovation, for free thinking, and for very progressive, work. And just to make one point, please, we have been enslaved by thinking that you must be looking for foreign investors. My understanding is that a foreign investor that comes to a country where the domestic investors are not doing well is a swindler. He's going to swindle you. The first thing is we should make our own investors very comfortable and happy, because it's only in their own comfort and happiness that they will then signal to their peers anywhere the bona fide progressive investors like themselves. But if you have a crummy environment, people are not safe, and people are still coming to
Well, Prof did mention that was the last point that he wanted to make, but he's made very, very integral and very important points. I would say that just to kind of sum it up, because he was in and out a little bit, he said that for us to have that enabling environment for business, we need to secure the state and ensure that there's security. We need power. We need internet connectivity, as we've seen in today's conversation, good transportation systems, and we need to empower our internal financial structures as opposed to looking outwardly for funding. Prof, I was just summarizing what you said.
Yes, you have done it so well. Very well done.
Fantastic.
Very well done.
This has been a really phenomenal conversation, and we're kind of bringing it to a close. And we don't have any questions in the audience, or from the audience, which is fantastic. Which means that everything that you've said has been clear and has been easy to digest and understand. So I believe that this has been a very, very interesting, but also very important conversation. And my last question to you would have been, if you could change one thing in Nigeria's democratic or economic system to unlock inclusive growth, what would it be? But I think that we've answered that question in the course of the conversation already, in terms of Section 16 of the Constitution, strengthening institutional structures, empowering the citizen and the CSO to speak up, and ensuring that there's open conversation, and of course the other things within the state that need to be addressed so that the system can be cohesive and work for everyone. So I'll just give Prof and Dr. Joseph 1 minute to just say any final words or concluding statements before we then wrap up the conversation. So over to you, Prof, while we still have you, and before the network fails us again. Very important, the network issue we need to address. Any concluding statements, just in about 30 seconds to 1 minute, or final words before we wrap it up.
Well, is that me? You want me to talk?
Yes, Prof. Yes, please.
Okay. Like you have put the finger on it very well. First, Section 16 of our Constitution should be made justiciable so that people can go and challenge government when they are deviating. It is the deviation from that principle that is actually at the root of our challenges. Number two, government of the day should try and solve problems of insecurity. They should try and solve problem of power, and they should try and solve
I think Prof was just about to say we should try and solve the issue of power and also the issue of internet connectivity. But I think we'd go to you, Dr. Joseph, now for just your final thoughts and reflections.
Yeah, so thanks a lot. So for me, before I go to my final point and reflections, and so I just want to support what Prof, mentioned about, the challenges we face with power and also insecurity, right? So this resonates well with what we found from our business confidence monitor. So NESG, we sample or we survey businesses just to gauge their pulse every month on the key challenges they face, and we do this across different sectors, right? Agri, manufacturing, and services, right? So throughout 2024 and recently, we still see that businesses outlined challenges with power and also insecurity as top 5 of the biggest challenges they face in the economy. So I just want to align my points with I just want to align with what Prof mentioned, that power and insecurity are key challenges. We also even for the private sector businesses, they face these challenges. For my final thought, I just want to say that so democracy is not a silver bullet for economic development, right? And but a well-functioning democracy will help ensure that development is inclusive, that it is just and it's also sustainable. And there is need for the government to actually work on its institution. You need to strengthen institution, right? So it's only when you strengthen institutions, these institutions will help to check some of the current challenges which we experience. And I will leave by saying that it is not too late for Nigeria to chart the path to create an inclusive it's not too late for Nigeria to chart the path to create a better and prosperous economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph, and thank you so much, Prof, for sticking with us throughout the challenges that ensued during this conversation. I think that it has been a really productive conversation. I personally have learned a lot. It's been a pleasure and an honor to have a conversation with both of you, both giants in your field, both having a wealth of knowledge. And I've learned that, the quality of government matters. The citizens have such a huge role to play, and so do the civil society organizations, the private sector, and other actors. Public resources must be managed properly. Section 16 of the Constitution should be looked at again. There are certain foundational things that we must put in place, like the rule of law, the foundations and the principles of government, accountability, participation, transparency, and things like that. Strong institutions also matter a lot. Citizens should not just play a role in making demands, but also in providing some sort of oversight and accountability to the governance systems. And democracy fuels innovation, and democracy fuels investment, and democracy can certainly play a role in ensuring and unlocking our prosperous economic future. But we can't sit and say we are in a democracy and so we should automatically unlock that economic future. We need to work at it. And I would echo a quote from Prof that says, when he said, it's not just, don't ask what the government or what the country will do for you, but ask what will you do for your country. And so as we round off, thank you, Prof, once again. Thank you, Dr. Joseph, once again, for taking the time this conversation with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to everyone that joined the call.
Thank you very much.
Comments that listened with rapt attention, and we'll take forward some of these, key insights that we've talked about today. And as we celebrate Democracy Day in a few days, it's a time to celebrate, but also it's a time to reflect, and it's a time to come together and work towards ensuring that in the future, when we're having conversations like this, we're not saying the same things, but we're making strides and taking steps to ensuring that our democracy is working towards unlocking Nigeria's economic prosperous future. Thank you so much to the NESG for organizing such an important session. And I guess I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you, Dr. Joseph. Goodbye,
Thank
everyone.
you very much. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Salapi. Very nice. Very excellent moderation. Excellent.
Thank you very much, Prof.
And then Dr. Gibe, thank you very much for those.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Contributions.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you. All right. All right.